The cost of attendance figure includes tuition and fees. That's easy enough. It's usually a set amount, usually assumes full-time attendance. But we will also add in an allowance for room and board. It is very important you understand what's behind the figures that the schools quote you. For example, at Loyola, the room and board allowance that we use for a student who is living on campus in our dorms is based on the average cost of a double room in a freshman dorm and an average meal plan. But students can choose to live in a single room. They can choose to get the top of the line meal plan. They can choose all sorts of services and amenities to make their lives in the dormitory almost close to being like they were at home with you guys, calling them up to wake them up and to do laundry and everything else like that. So those costs, if you choose to use them, can drive up your actual costs, but your financial aid is going to be assuming basic Walmart costs, okay? And if a student stays local, there is an allowance for them staying at home because we do know that if they're still living at home with you, you have to feed them and that cost. So know what that figure is. The school will give an allowance for books. Books are a very expensive commodity on college campuses. We are now required to tell your students how they can save money on buying textbooks. When you get at that point, encourage your students to look at that part of the website on how they can save money by using used books, e-books, and everything else like that, because college textbooks are terribly expensive. In cost of attendance, we also give an allowance for personal expenses and travel cost. This is travel cost generally for students out of state to come to school, go home at Christmas, and come back again. This is not cost to go to New York for Thanksgiving, to Acapulco for spring break, and all the other things. And that can drive up expenses for families for planning purposes. So remember, when you see those cost of attendance figures, know what underlies them when you're making decisions. This is the slide we always use when private schools go out and talk to families. Your need varies based on the cost of the school. If you assume the red rectangle is Tulane, the most expensive school on the block, assume Loyola's yellow, we're middle of the road, and the blue block is UNL. Your expected family contribution for federal and state aid programs is going to be the same at all three schools. We all do the same thing. So you will have more need, at the most need at Tulane, than us, than UNL. Now the thing is, this is where deadlines become very important. If your student has a talent that we want, for example at Loyola, our music school is our football team. We have many bands and combos that we need lots of musicians for. If your student is, for example, a talented saxophone player a year when we need to recruit lots of saxophone players, and your student meets the priority deadlines, it could be that we will offer him or her institutional aid sufficient that your out-of-pocket costs as a parent are the same as if he or she goes to UNL. But again, that's if your student has the skills we are looking for, because we all want a well-rounded class, and meets the deadlines. Those are two critical things. So we don't want you to be scared away at the start by cost of schools, but you do need to pay attention to it and do the math before you make your final commitment deposits. With federal aid programs, these are the maximums right now, but again, the President's aid proposals that are going to be in the paper soon, what he generally wants to do, and it's hard to argue with it, is to simplify stuff so there's basically one federal grant program, one federal loan program, instead of the bunches we have right now. So right now, what we have is the federal Pell Grant program, and that's what the President wants to expand eligibility for. The maximum this year is $5,350. A couple of years ago, President Bush created the Academic Competitiveness Grant program, where students who are Pell Grant eligible could get an additional $750. Mr. Obama wants to wipe that out and add that money to Pell Grants. The Teach Grant program was created 2 years ago, and this is to encourage students to become highly certified teachers in math and science and other high-need areas. Students can get $4,000 a year as a grant in return for promising to teach for 4 years in an inner-city school, basically. There are lots of caveats. The Teach program is a wonderful idea, but there are lots of caveats associated with it, that if you do not meet all the conditions, the grant will turn into a loan. So if your student gets this in their aid package and is tempted to sign up for it, please read it carefully and make sure that the students understand what they're getting themselves into. You will be hearing lots of information and in the news about the loan programs, the staggered loan programs. The maximum that a freshman can get each year is $5,500. The amount the student can borrow each year goes up by their grade level. The President's proposal right now there are 2 ways families can get these loans. One is through the bank and one is then directly from the government. What the President's proposing is that the banks no longer lend under the program because the government pays the banks to do this, and that all loans will be going through the Department of Education. So if you've had an older sibling or you had student loans, what you did in the past to get them probably is going to be changing maybe as soon as July 1st. The next 3 programs are what we call campus-based programs. The schools get a certain amount each year based on their size and enrollment. So when you're comparing award letters from the schools, you might see different amounts, and that's going to be based on the size of the school and the money that they get from the Department of Education. The Federal Perkins Loan right now, students can get a maximum of $4,000 a year. This again is one of the programs that President Obama wants to mess around with, so that's going to be changing. The Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, that's generally again geared towards students who are eligible for Pell Grants. The maximum the student can get is $4,000 a year. And work study is based on the amount of funds that the school gets every year. We generally assume at Loyola that our students can earn $2,000 over the course of the year. They get paid the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. That's kind of working 10 to 15 hours a week over the most part of the school year. And as a parent, there is the Federal Plus Loan Program that would let you borrow the difference between the cost of attendance and the student's aid. State aid programs, if your student chooses to stay in Louisiana, there are 3 major state aid programs. The Top Scholarship Program. It's very important that you make sure your student has taken all the core curriculum components for the Top Scholarship. The Top Scholarship will pay tuition at the state schools. Now remember, you will be still responsible for fees at the state schools, and the fees is where you can get hit up for stuff. Or if your student comes to the private schools in Louisiana, Tulane, Loyola, Dillard, Holy Cross, and Centenary, what they give us is the weighted average tuition. So the average Top Scholarship for the 2008-2009 year was $2,686. For the current year, it's about $2,700. The GO Grant was a new program that was created in 2007-2008 when the state seemed to have a lot of money. At that point, all students who were Pell Grant eligible could get $2,000 a year. For the current school year, because the state doesn't have as much money, these awards are now prorated, so it can range from anywhere from $499 to $2,000. If the state continues to have budget problems, I would assume the GO grants are going to be messed with first. Sometimes you hear news reports about TOPS. I can't see the state really messing with TOPS just because of the political implications of that for any politician. The third program that the state offers is in combination with the Department of Education, the federal government, and it's called the LEAP Grant Program. And the maximum that a student can get every year is $2,000. And again, the amounts that the schools have are based on the size of the school. So at Loyola, we only have like $30,000 under the program, and that doesn't go real far.